Hello there and welcome back to my art table. Today I'm going to do a new textured painting on a little larger panel. It's a 16 by 20. I've done a couple on this and this is just a regular canvas covered board art panel. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use Crackle paste. I got a request from somebody to work with some Crackle paste, and this is a very unique texture medium. I love working with this. It leaves such a cool texture when you're done. So you apply this, and with this one you really need to let it dry several days, if not a week or more, because the drier it gets, the more it cracks and the more interesting of a texture you're left with. So where some of the other mediums I use, you can just let it dry overnight or for a couple days and then it's good to go. This one you really have to let dry for a few days, and you'll see it crack more and more each day, so it's very unique. One thing about this medium that I don't like is that it dries up really fast. So when you have some, use it or store it with in an area that's a little more humid or in a plastic bag or something. I don't do that all the time, and I'm sorry because I end up throwing away jars of it. But this is what it looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in a strip right here, applied along the jar I had. It's getting a little dry. It's generally a very thick, creamy consistency, and there's definitely some lumps in here. I'm going to have to press down. This is, the thicker you apply this, the more cracks you're gonna get. So it's, you can apply it. I sometimes use it with other texture mediums on the same painting. Sometimes just using a little bit of this for a little different texture in certain areas of the painting. And sometimes I just use it alone. This one I'm just gonna use it alone. And I'm gonna paint kind of this strip across here and let this dry really well, and then come back, and then we're going to do a layered glaze color on the areas that don't have the Crackle paste, this and this, and then we're going to go ahead and apply some color on top of the Crackle paste. So I'm going to finesse this a little bit, try to get it as straight as possible. Sometimes I literally take out a tape measure and measure, from here to the end and make sure that it is consistently straight. It looks like I need a little more here on this end. And it's a pretty thick coat. I'm going to do a pretty thick coat on this one. Let it dry really well, and then we're going to come back and do those colors. So that's the first step of working with Crackle paste. And you can use this on a board, you can use this on a wood board, a canvas board, a stretched canvas. I would not suggest using a lot of these mediums on paper or mixed media paper or any surface that isn't very, very rigid, because as they dry they seize up and then you're going to get wrinkles, and you're actually going to get some cracks where you don't want them if you do that, because I have tried that before. It does not work very well. So that's about it for the Crackle paste. I'm going to continue to finesse this, and then we will come back when it's good and dry and you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here's a quick update and look at the Crackle texture as it dried. Now my Crackle paste was a little dry and lumpy, so it's a little lumpier than normal, but you can see the cracks in how this dried. And this is about drying 10 days. So that is good and dry, and right now I am going to work on putting some glazes and creating some color on this painting. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up on my handy dandy dollar store paper plate palette some Phthalo turquoise high flow, some teal liquid, and some phthalo blue green shade. And I'm going to mix those up with a little water and some of my trusty glaze. And I'm going to use the satin right now with this, with a little water, and get a nice pretty glazed sort of translucent bottom. So I'm putting a little water on. You can mist your painting or just brush a little water on like I'm doing, because you really don't want to apply acrylics to a dry surface because they will really grab. And if you want a little flow, if you want that to happen, of course you can do that. But if you want some flow, which I do, then I'm going to just use a fairly wet surface. And this gives me a lot of, quite a light coat and texture. So I'm applying this all over. This is just the teal. I'm just doing a very light coat, as you can see, fairly green. And I'm trying to decide where I want to enrich this. So I'm going to take some off, just a little dab like this. Just so I can then go back over it with some of the other colors. So I'm going to grab a little of the phthalo, the high flow turquoise. And this is going to give me a little more richness in that color. And a little phthalo blue. Here's my palette, so you can see. I'm just kind of grabbing them all, mixing them all around. And I'm going to have to do a few different coats with this to get the luminosity that I want. But this is going to essentially be sort of a cascading look. And I want depth in certain areas of color, and I want lightness in other areas. So I'm going to kind of let that dry and then come back into it with some more coats of the glaze. So when you're working with glaze, you really do have to have patience. You have to let each coat dry really well in between. If you don't, you're not going to get the luminosity and the colors. If they're a little bit wet and you start to apply a new coat, they're going to lift the under layer, and that's frustrating when you have a layer laid down that you really like, and then you try to put a layer on top by being impatient. And they're done that, and it doesn't work so well. So I'm going to leave this right now. I'm pretty good with where this all is, and lift a little of that color off the texture. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put down subsequent layers and try to build up a nice sort of luminosity from underneath with those glazes. And then we're going to come back and do the texture. Okay, see you next segment. Okay, so now we're back. I let that coat of glaze dry really well for a day or two. Then I just mixed up a little more glaze with what was on my palette and applied another coat all over. Then I put a little more glaze on my palette with a little white and a little water. And I just decided to just kind of give it a little more lightness in certain areas, just like this. So, and still doing the cascading effect with my brush. So that is all I've done. I'm going to let this get a nice, good dryness to it, so we can come back and then we can work on doing some of the top color on the actual crackle area here on the texture. Okay, so I let that dry, and what I've done is I've taken a little iridescent white and some iridescent gold. These are acrylics, and they both have a little shimmer to them. And I'm just working with a little bit of each, kind of mixing just to get a little bit of a shimmery color. I'm using a flat brush. It's kind of a craft brush that I use. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop some color down on the crackle area of the texture and let just my brush kind of softly drop down color, and you can see how that just lays it sort of on the nubby parts of the texture and picks up just sort of the heightened areas, so not giving it a full 100% glaze over this area. I'm just picking up bits on the texture. So that's the beautiful thing of working with a textured surface. You can really create dimensional art like this that looks like it really has some highs and lows, various dimensions, by just using that texture. And you can build up texture medium as much as you like. I'm actually picking up the paint instead of dipping it in. I'm laying my brush flat on it and picking it up that way, and then just laying it down like this. And that's the effect that I'm interested in for this. There are a couple areas here I'm gonna kind of put in just a little bit more, just so it has a little more shimmer in a couple spots. And I may actually even go over this with another color. I'm not sure right now, kind of just working as we go. But I'm really liking how this is picking up this texture in these areas here. So I'm going to keep working on this, and then I will come back and finish it up. Okay, we are going to finish up our painting now. I have added all the gold and everything that I want and the color. So I'm going to be using a flat brush to apply a final coat of glaze. And this glaze is actually something that I've mixed with a little bit of gold. So it's just an acrylic gold paint and my glaze mix, which is satin and gloss mixed. And I mix this up, and I use this sometimes to finish off some paintings that I want to have sort of a glimmery golden finish. So I'm just going to mist my panel here with a little water. My brush is a little damp. And I'm going to just put a nice coat of golden glaze on the top of this. Just so. It's going to be very clear. There's not a lot of paint in there with the glaze, just enough to give it sort of a glimmery finish. And you can do this with a silver, a platinum, any kind of metallic if you want to just give it a sort of a pearly finish, any of your artwork. And I find that's really pretty, especially on like a white artwork, something that's very white or neutral, or got any metallic on it like this. It gives it just a real pretty finish. So I go over each way. I always go over in the direction of the painting, whether it's a linear or a vertical. And even though this has a linear line here, I do look at it as a vertical painting because it goes this way. So I'm just going to let this dry, and then I will show you final pictures and how to display it. And if you have any questions about anything, I do appreciate you watching my tutorials. I hope you like them. I hope they're helpful, and just please like, subscribe, comment. I do read all the comments, so I really appreciate you watching. Thank you.